I wasn't going to comment on this again, but after finding out that Jubilee, a company that advocates for free speech to find middle ground, was copyright striking people's reaction videos simply for using their footage, I thought it was time to press record and open my big fat mouth. Now, why would a company that encourages conversations between opposing sides be copyright striking Blaire's video and other reaction channels? Well, that's because Blaire mopped the floor with them in their own house. Because Jubilee seems to be afraid of the power of the people, this reaction video is going to be a little bit different. I'll be giving you context on what was said and show you a small clip from that section. Keep in mind, I already saw this debate, so this is pretty much just going to be a rant. For the sake of time and for the sake of my channel, my reaction will be edited down to what I think are the most important parts of the conversation. In simplest terms, go fuck yourself, go copyright somebody else. First of all, let's discuss something very important, or I should be saying someone very important. Blossom. Already talked about her in my last video on Blaire White, my original video on Blaire White that I'm hoping all of you have seen by now. Within that video, besides telling you what happened to Blaire and what occurred to Blaire and Blaire's description of things, Blaire's side, I showed you a little compilation that I put together to show you just exactly who Blossom is. So if you haven't seen that yet, go ahead and go watch that and then come back so you can get a little bit of an idea of who we're dealing with here. And I mention her because besides Blaire, and Blaire, to be honest with you, was only one of the highlights of that debate because she didn't allow herself to be pounded down. So she did speak up when she needed to. But besides Blaire, she literally takes over basically the entire debate, and she is allowed to do that for basically the entire debate. I want to preface that just so that you understand what Blaire had to deal with, Blaire and the other conservatives on the panel. The first debate prompt was, is it a safety concern for trans women to share a female restroom? The time has come. Let's get into this mess.
Say that they're trans, because now anything is trans if you say so, that person should probably stay absolutely out of women's restrooms, because you're there to get your rocks off and the women are there to take a poop and a pee. So it's not the same. And I really empathize with women who have an issue with it. And I can probably hear some women commenting, well, how do I know the difference between a fetishist and a real trans person? It's hard. It's hard. However, that's the only nuance that I know to give to it, which is there's different reasons people are trans, and some people really are trans because they're horny, and some people are trans because they really felt that way from, a young age or whatever.
See, I agree to an extent. Like, when you go to transition, and this is a fairly universal experience, once you get to a certain point of passing, that's about the time that you would start going into the other bathroom, as opposed to not make the same sex uncomfortable. Once you reach that point in your transition, a lot of things change, but you start to see things from another perspective. You start to see things from the perspective of a cis person.
And I think that it simply boils down to that. Simply boils down to the difference between real transsexual people and the difference between perverts who are going to the bathroom to, like Blaire said, get their rocks off.
We're in a state right now where you have to allow anybody to use whatever restroom they want.
If you're a decent human being, you do what causes the least disturbance. So, for example, I filmed a YouTube video a few years ago where I entered a men's restroom just because I was responding to comments who were like, well, maybe you should use a men's restroom if you really feel like the way you feel. And so I said, okay, let's do it. Let's put a camera. And I was kicked out within seconds of the entire establishment, and it was a whole ruckus. So that's what I mean by, if you're a decent person, you do what causes the least amount of problems for people around you. And if you're, a moral person, you're going to be conflict avoidant in general when it's something like that, right? It's like, what's the point of causing issues for anyone, especially if you're really just trying to pee?
I think just put
Get
your
it
head
done.
down, go in.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, this out of all of them is the most common sense prompt, because if you're trying to use the bathroom of the gender that you apparently, allegedly should have transitioned to, if that's your goal, then if you transitioned correctly, if you know what you're doing, if you are doing the work, you're doing the work to present yourself as the gender that you allegedly transitioned to, how would anybody know the difference? Nobody can look at your genitalia from pushing the door to go into the bathroom. And I could understand, and I totally empathize and get where the fear of perverts in the bathroom comes from. So I get it. But again, if you cannot tell, let's say that you are the most transphobic individual on the planet. If you cannot tell and you just go blindly, use the restroom, and then somebody comes out and you overhear this person that was just in the bathroom with you talking with a friend in the other table about their transition, you literally just found out. You shared the bathroom with them, you used the bathroom without any issues, you survived for the most part, I would say. You just found out they were trans after using the bathroom. You didn't have a problem before. Why do you have a problem now? So I get that part of things. Again, this is the most common sense prompt. If you look like the sex you transition to, girl, use the bathroom. Fucking pee. Don't give yourself a UTI.
Who cares who's trans and who's cis going in the bathroom? You should be minding your own business, being able to pee and do your business in peace, for the most part. That conversation around this man with a boner on or whatever like that, I saw that picture and I thought to myself, that's really a right-wing talking point and conservative propaganda, because that's their ideology.
How is it
when it
was a
comes
thing
to
that
trans?
happened.
I'm speaking. That's their ideology when it comes to trans. It's because conservatives have a basic level understanding of what transness is in the first place. And with all due respect,
Is it though? Is it just right-wing propaganda? Is it just conservative propaganda? Because I believe this article is by the New York Post. 17-year-old scolded for crying over transgender woman's penis at YMCA. Published January 14th, 2023. Earlier this year. Is it a right-wing talking point, or did I just show it to you? A talking point is turning the frogs gay. Not a woman with a penis in the way, Sam I am. I do not like green eggs and ham. The next prompt was, I support the transgender military ban.
I support the transgender military ban. Agreeers?
I think that oftentimes when you talk about trans people in the military, people forget that most places, if we're talking about feet on the ground and really going into war zones, are really dangerous for trans people. And so it's really an extra risk.
You're talking about the culture that exists over
Yeah,
there.
the Middle
Yeah,
East, you
yeah.
know, it's like that's not exactly
the
trans
friendliest
friendly.
place
It's
for
actually
us,
the
yes.
opposite. The medications that we take sometimes put us in conflict with being able to actually be combat ready. But there is some nuance here, obviously. Like if there was a trans cook or a trans medic, I'm not exactly going to be upset. But for the most part, when it comes to combat,
I hate supporting, like what you just said, I hate supporting it because it goes to the narrative of the should athletes compete in sports, you know, but
trans athletes.
yeah,
They
the
shouldn't.
drugs we take do weaken us, you know, so we're not, like you just said, combat ready, but we're also not as physically strong as the guy counterparts standing right next to us.
And I
so.
will say, like, as a
Right, and I agree. Not only do the medications that are given to transgender people, people who are actually taking medication to be transgender, the medication that is given to them, yes, it does break down the body. It does affect their ability to perform. But the biggest thing that it affects is the psyche, because there are statistics on the fact that, and this is actually a topic that they're going to touch on, how everybody says that unless you trans your kid, it's going to be the end of their life. Not really. There's actually studies that have come out to say that once they're on that medication, once they're on medication to transition, which they're on for life, the mental health of individuals actually gets worse. So imagine being in a job where people already are affected by post-traumatic stress. There's PTSD up the ass. And you're going to go in with a mental health condition that is already debilitating enough as it is. It's going to be hard for you to navigate your emotions during the middle of combat when you have people shooting at you. And keep in mind, the military pays for the schooling, the salary, as well as I think pretty much most benefits are covered when you're in the military. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments down below. But for the most part, they take care of you when it comes to the benefits. That money comes from somewhere. It's called our taxes. So we're going to be giving our money, our tax dollars, to fund the mental health issues of transgender individuals in the military. Now, does that mean that we should completely ban transgender people from the military? In my opinion, no, it doesn't. But I don't think it's a good idea to put them into combat zones when they are already vulnerable as it is. I don't think that is smart. So I don't think that they should be on the front lines. That's my personal opinion. Desk job, cook, whatever. You do you, girl.
So do you want an answer to your question, or are you just going to rant? Because I can answer. You said, what about those people that were kicked out? I actually think it's bad if you are someone who was in it and you really are, because just like, Sarah, and I've met many trans veterans that I've paid respect to publicly on social media, and I think that's amazing, actually. So if you're kicked out and it was once, the norm
But
that
what's
you
the
could,
resources you're
I'm
offering
speaking
them?
though. If you're kicked out and it once was the norm for you to participate in the military, that's sad. But at the same time, if that is what is determined for the ultimate safety and effectiveness of the military, nothing should come before that.
Blaire, have you ever worked directly with trans
Because the second
people?
bomb.
Have you ever worked
I
directly?
am right now.
No,
We're
directly
surrounded by
in
them.
services in terms of nonprofits
Sir,
and
she's
actually
a
getting
trans
clientele.
person.
She's not
That's my
grassroots.
entire
She is
career.
not a grassroots
Not
person
grassroots.
because truth be told, a lot of our
What does that
community
even mean?
is in grassroots.
Have you ever had a
Nonprofit
client list of
organizations that are
transgender people that you
trans-led. Hold
actually
on just
took
a
care
second.
of
Hold
them?
on just a second.
Took care of them, like what, like
Trans-led
paid their
or-
bills? No,
I'm
I don't
sorry,
Offering them
excuse me,
services, getting them through
I've helped a
services.
lot of trans people in my life,
Trans-led
yes.
organizations that are ran by trans people. I really want to see what you've done for those organizations because I don't see any of y'all on the front line.
The front lines of what? This isn't a fucking war. Grassroots? What the fuck is she talking about?
Line. Like,
fighting
what are
against
you
the-
talking about?
I'm
I've
on the front
dedicated,
line.
hold on. I've dedicated my entire life to, in my own way, and you can disagree with it because we all have our vehicles and our methods towards
Absolutely.
promoting trans acceptance and the ultimate progression of the quality of life of trans people. I've dedicated my entire life to that, right? I access millions of people every single month on all my
Including
social
me,
media.
bitch.
And I have people reaching out all the time saying that I've saved them from,
what are
just
you
like we
physically
mentioned,
doing,
suicide.
Blaire?
What are you physically
doing.
Physically.
That is the point.
Have you ever
Okay,
taken
so
on a
here's the
client
thing.
load?
Do you
Have you
have
ever
like a
had
trans-
someone come
here's
to
the
you
I'm sorry, do
homeless
you
and
have
give
like-
them
do
resources?
I'm
you have
sure
like
you
a
guys
trans
feel,
line
you guys
or
are asking
something?
questions and you have no interest in the answer. I'm sure you guys are very, very proud of
Because
the
you're
fact that
going
you can
around in
walk.
circles, Blaire. That's what we're saying.
How could it be a circle when I haven't answered the question at all because you keep speaking? I'm sure you guys
Exactly.
are very proud that you can enter a building and work with 25 people at a time. I access millions
Oh,
every
that is
month,
not
babe.
what
That's what I
nonprofit
do.
work is.
You
are
can.
It's really
so
disappointing that you would
disconnected
ever
from that.
equate
This is
community
disappointing,
services.
actually. This is disappointing, actually.
This is very
It's
she's very
disappointing that you would
disconnected.
disrespect all of the people that are in community service and all of these social workers that actually do
Correct.
help trans people.
And it's really disappointing that you guys are
Okay.
disrespecting what the fuck I do, right?
When you say something about what is grassroots, that's the problem that I feel that some
Well, you're
trans
using a
influencers are
metaphor for
disconnected.
something that's
That is not a
professional.
They're gonna
metaphor.
speak in
That is
platitudes
that
the
is
whole
a
time. That's
tangible
what they're gonna do.
resource organization. Because if you, this is where y'all's privilege come in. Because if y'all don't need
My privilege?
services,
My
from
content is a
trans-
resource.
If you do not need
First
services
of all,
from
ma'am, don't come from my
nonprofits
privilege.
that are trans-led,
Because
you have
I was raised by
privilege
drug
and you
addicts.
have
I have
access.
HIV.
I'm sorry.
I create the resources.
I would rather
I create
work
the
with
resources. My
detransitioners
content
than
is a
trans
resource.
people. So we're going to work with detransitioners who actually
Okay.
need our help.
This is one of the clearest examples of where instead of focusing on the topic at hand, they decide that they want to derail it and instead focus on Blaire's career. Again, the prompt isn't about Blaire at all whatsoever. And by the way, this video was edited. The video that they posted was edited. This was supposed to be the first topic, not the second one that they have listed here. So you see Blaire pissed, heated, annoyed, because literally in the first prompt, They all decided to gang up on her and start attacking her for her career. So if you see her upset or annoyed, that's why. That is exactly why. They are quite literally just attacking her. If this was the other way around, the liberals would be talking about the fact that this was bullying and they were attacked and Blaire White is disgusting and it would be a whole thing. But it's them, so of course, it's fair game. To say that Blaire White hasn't impacted the trans community in a positive way is insane, absolutely insane. Simply put, let's see how many total views Blaire has on her YouTube channel, because earlier I checked and we're talking about over 250 million views just since almost 2016 she started, November 27, 2015. In less than 10 years, she's amassed over 250 million views. That's not easy. So she has definitely impacted quite a few people. And to Blossom trying to point out people's privilege in a room full of trans people who I'm sure all have gone through some sort of struggle is beyond insane. It is beyond insane. Imagine looking at someone who's been through just as much as you and then holding a ruler up to their trauma. You're disgusting. Simply put.
There are
and
easier
protect
ways to get drugs.
us.
There are easier ways to get drugs, and to join the military, that's a big commitment to
Let's
get
just
drugs.
put it this
to-
way.
to-
There are
to
far
Do it
less
for high school, too,
debilitating
or
things that will
education.
disqualify you from access to the military than trans. And if you
Yeah.
want to put it on a scale, trans is one of those things that for a lot of people is quite debilitating, whether it's mentally, physically, whatever. If you have, social anxiety, if you have depression, any of these things that are less mentally taxing than gender dysphoria, all those things, then why is it that we should have like a go around because we're trans? I go with what the generals say. I go with what the people at the top say. This is what is the most effective way to have our military.
Just not General Milley.
I just really
Just
hope
not
that the
General
people
Milley.
at the
No,
top
not
that you're-
him. You know what I mean?
just
It
really hope
levels
that
to
the
that,
people-
too.
I just really hope that the people at the top that you're referring to aren't transphobic, because let's be clear of the isms that are in the
God.
military.
Man, we live
that
in
a lot of
America.
us face.
People are allowed
Excuse me,
to
I'm
be.
speaking. Do not interrupt a black trans woman when she's speaking.
You've
Let's be
interrupted
very
me
clear
hella
when it comes
times.
to
That was so fucking ridiculous. That was, wow, she was holding that one in the whole debate. She was ready for that one. She was like, when can I drop that one in? That was insane. Wow. Privilege. You want to talk about privilege when you're the only one in the conversation who can use their skin color as a tool to make their point. Wow.
when
Hella
it comes
times.
to isms.
Did the interrupter just
Again,
say
if you
use
are
her
black,
skin tone
if
to
you
say you
are
couldn't
black,
interrupt her?
if you are black and
That's
trans
amazing.
and you want to go into the military, I am quite sure that my experience would not look the same as y'all's. And if we can't wake that up, then we're really being complicit.
They don't look at your race.
I don't think your
But you-
skin tone makes any difference.
Well,
As somebody-
yes, it does.
No,
Well,
as
I'm
somebody-
sorry.
no, as somebody who's
But it
serving in the
doesn't.
military,
For you to
as
tell a
somebody who-
black person
no,
that
as-
is so
as somebody who's
problematic.
serving,
For
as-
you
So
to
why
tell
do
a
you have
person
to
of
put
color
black in
here,
front of it?
because this is my experience and this is my reality. First of all,
It has nothing
that
to
is
do with
so
your transness,
disrespectful
though.
to tell a person
I'm
of
gonna have an
color, a
aneurysm.
black person, how they should feel. How dare you sit up there
Okay,
and
well,
say
no,
that?
it's disrespectful
And
for
somebody
you
who's
as a white
saying, hold on
person.
just
You
a second. Let me
screamed
finish
at
my
him
point.
and used
I
your
did not
skin.
scream
Yes,
at a
you
point.
did.
No,
No, you're
wanted
being
me to come and
disrespectful.
back.
Rewind the tape,
You
you
wanted me
screamed.
here and I'm
You
here.
screamed.
So what you
Rewind
going
the
to?
tape, that was good.
You wanted me here, so I'm here.
Replay.
You in
Right,
particular.
so
just
so
want
be
you to calm
respectful.
down and speak like
Be
a
in
white person.
particular, what are
It's
you
not my
talking
fault.
about?
It's not my
Let's
fault that
pause.
y'all don't understand
I'm
respect.
sorry. Let's pause.
You're interrupting.
What the fuck was that? She's literally having a fucking meltdown. What the fuck? Are you seeing this? This is literally insane. She is quite literally just having a fucking meltdown. How are they allowing her to do this? The next prompt was, it's okay for minors to get top surgery.
It's okay for minors to get top surgery.
No, absolutely not.
Really?
You guys waited on that?
That's pretty vile.
I feel like the vibe is like like as someone who had top surgery and went on hormones, like it's a very emotionally intense experience. I think in terms of like minors getting surgery, like the reason why I'm not like no to that is because I feel like maybe someone's like 17 or something. I honestly feel like it is a really intense surgery, but I feel like if somebody's like 17 or like late 16 and like feels like it's right for them, I mean, like people are really different. I know for me, like top surgery when I was like 16 would have been like so good, and it would have literally like saved my spinal cord from like binding all the time. That's why I'm like, yeah, like I feel like in instances like it can make sense.
So I'm not a trans man, so I don't have the experience or whatnot, but I do think that it has to be done safely. There is a process when it comes to having these types of gender-affirming surgeries. You know what I'm saying? Talking with your parents and then going to endocrinologists and going through therapy to make sure this is right for you. People have a choice to their autonomy. Now, I know that everybody does not, but those that do or whatnot should choose with the right medical education.
Yeah.
They should choose with safety and with full understanding of what is a benefit and what may not be a benefit.
Right. And how do you make that differentiation when you're 13? How can you think of all of the terrible, terrible, terrible things that can happen to you if it goes wrong, or if, guess what, it just wasn't the right choice for you? These are children. When I was 16 years old, pretty much around the age that he's talking about, I had a list on my phone filled with tattoos that I wanted to get when I was old enough, when I was 18, because my parents didn't let me have any. Thank God. When I was 16, the list was enormous. As an adult now, when I remember what was on that list, I am so glad that I was not allowed to make that choice. Because out of all of the tattoos that you see on me today, none of them are from that list. None of them.
I think would be like really rare anyway, but that's just my stance.
That I agree with to an extent.
This is definitely the prompt that I am the most passionate about, because I think there are few things more vile, more irresponsible, more, dangerous than saying a child can consent to permanently removing a body part that serves an extremely important function. Detransitioners all over the country can never breastfeed their children if they can even have them, because if they did other things, that can stop them from having kids at all, right? The idea that a child can consent to a sex change, to gender-affirming surgery, if you believe that, there's really nothing that you can believe they can't consent to, right? Because that's pretty extreme. That's a permanent body modification under the best circumstances. So you want to move aside all the complications, all the things you can't do, the sterilization, not being able to feed your kids. You can even set that aside. Just the permanent body modification, I mean, you have to be so demented to believe that a child fully understands. I heard a few conversations about, well, if the child fully understands, they don't. They don't, because they're children. That's like how being a child works.
Exactly. She couldn't have hit it on the nail better. Because they're fucking children. Because they're a child. If we're talking about adults here, adult transgender people, I believe in freedom. If you are 18 years old and you want to cut off your breast, that is your problem. Welcome to America. You can do whatever you want here, as long as it's legal. Welcome to America. But if you are under the age of 18 and you're being given the opportunity to sign on the dotted line that you want to remove your breasts, where are we in society that we are looking at children and saying, okay, that's fine? What is going on?
Considers herself queer. So she blew the whistle and said that they had an in-house doctor. If you couldn't find a affirming therapist to sign off on the form, they would pencil whip it.
But do you believe that it should happen? Do you believe there should be a process when it comes to medical transition?
No, there's no right process for kids to hack off
no, I
their
was
breasts.
asking her. I'm sorry.
Well, I answered.
Not for kids, for adults.
Because I'm here in the room, so.
No.
Okay, thank you.
I feel like personally, like if we're talking about like a 12-year-old getting top surgery, like to me that's just like medical malpractice. Because I know for me, like to get top surgery, like I can only get it at 18 because my insurance covered it at 18. But I had to start that process like long before. Like even hormones was a long process. So I think there's like an area of literal like medical malpractice, because no like kid at that age should be getting that, in my opinion, because you do not know. But I do think there are instances where like a 16 or 17-year-old like could get it. And I don't know if that means like banning like below 16 or like whatever, but
So in the UK, it was
Wow, so it almost sounds like you kind of agree. It almost sounds like for whatever reason, the only difference to you is 2 years, which is crazy that you don't want to concede on 2 years of time. Again, I already gave you guys an example of what I was going to do when I was 16, what that would have looked like for me, and I would have looked like a newspaper, not one you would want to read.
I don't know if I would be here. And I've learned a lot through my transition and through my access. And I even grew up in the wild, wild west where everything was still on YouTube and we didn't really even have medical providers really even giving us guidance, and especially trans men. So I find it rather uncomfortable that we're able to make a 16-year-old be able to make that type of decision. An 18-year-old is allowed to go into service, but for some reason we can't give that same access to a kid to have that consciousness. Because I can tell you at 16, I knew who I was. I'm not at 12, not at 14, but 16, there's a certain level of consciousness and experience that you've experienced in society that you understand the pocket you fit in.
But just because other bad things.
That's bullshit. Wow, that was total bullshit. No, absolutely not. No, let's be 100% real here. If at 12, you didn't know who you were, at 14, you didn't know who you were, at 15, you didn't know who you were, but at 16, suddenly you found out who the fuck you were. Make that make sense. So what, 6 months taught you who you were? And even if you did know who you were, even if you felt like this was the best decision that you are ever going to make in your life, how can you trust that judgment? How? Because again, when I was 16, I would have looked a lot different. So imagine, for me, the difference would have been that I would have had more tattoos on my skin. For Abigail in Kentucky, the difference is that at 15, she had breasts, and at 25, she no longer had them and wished that she did. One of the last prompts was, non-binary should not be considered under the trans umbrella.
Non-binary should not be considered under the trans umbrella.
I agree.
This is evil.
I think that the concept of a transgender umbrella is inherently an issue, right? Because when you're talking about something as nuanced, complex, full of social dynamics, medical dynamics, so many things to be considered. When you're talking about a transsexual, you should really be specific, right? And this entire concept actually of transgender is relatively new. Like, it came about in the 70s or 80s through queer theory, when originally it was about transsexuals, which was considered a medical diagnosis, which was a medical process, and it defined something very specific. So for me, when I hear that non-binary, which, if I'm to understand correctly, means
I think
that
androgynous.
Right, and it means you identify somewhere in between male and female. That's not what a transsexual is.
The definition of a trans person is somebody whose body has been altered, or somebody who identifies as a different gender whose body has been altered via
Right.
hormones or surgery.
And there's two genders, so if you want to say, you identify as a different gender, it has to be one of those two,
That's
which
the
would
big
make you a
argument, yeah.
transsexual if you're actually trans. I think it makes about as much sense as saying that bisexual is under the straight umbrella. It's like, no, that's a separate thing. And I think there's beauty in being separate things. There's beauty in having your own lanes. And my concern is there's so much, clearly, as we see today.
Right. It's different. I mean, it's quite literally in the name. It's quite literally in the process that everybody talks about. If you do not transition from one gender to the other, again, two genders, male, female, if you do not transition from one gender to the other, what transition did you do? Where is your transition coming from? Is it a mental transition? Where did it come from? Because you didn't transition. There's a difference between being Boy George in the back, putting on a yellow hat and a really ugly dress and calling yourself a they them, compared to actually doing the work. Because guess what? Boy George can go home at night, take off the costume, and go to bed a man. Wake up a man, make the decision to be whatever the fuck, And then if they are bored of that, if they're bored, they can simply not wear it again. Because it's just as easy as your outfit. Forget androgynous David Bowie. I guarantee you, at some point in time, revisionist TikTok is going to try and say that he wasn't androgynous, he was non-binary. Promise you it's not going to be long.
Yeah, or fight the fight together.
Yeah, like, let's do it.
honestly,
Like,
We have
unite.
separate fights, though. That's the thing.
No, we
I don't
don't.
know if it
We're
is.
weakening our borders by creating this divide within our own community. This is so silly. Look, I actually understand like a lot of the points that are being made here from the conservative side because I grew up conservative. I voted when I was 18. I voted for fucking Bush. Yo.
Damn, girl.
Like I was conservative. Okay.
So we're the same age.
So it was not until my later age that I kind of decided, like, you know what, let me be more open to different types of communication, different types of people. I actually talked so much shit about pronouns. Like they, them, all this. I was like, what is this trash? When it first started really coming out, I did not agree with it. I was like, what is this? This is stupid. How can you be a them? Blah, 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 blah.
You were
And I did the
correct.
whole thing, the grammatically. You're interrupting me.
But you were correct. I'm
But
just saying. I'm agreeing with
they
you.
asked you not to
Not it being
comment,
off.
and you're commenting. So if you could stop, that would be great. Thank you. So anyway, as I was saying, so I changed my mind because I got to spend time around other people who were non-binary, who were non-conforming, and I got to speak with them and I got to experience their life and their experiences. And then I realized myself, I'm like, shit, maybe this is what I've been experiencing my whole life, only because I was exposed to it. If I would have never been exposed to it, I would have never known that this could have been my experience. And I would have lived the rest of my life as a different person, as somebody who I'm not. And it's funny that you keep talking, that some people keep talking about, oh, you need to go through HRT, you need to have surgeries in order to be trans. That is all garbage.
Another thing I never said. It's just so crazy.
Again,
I did.
you're still interrupting me while I'm talking. This is the second
You're
time now.
addressing me,
This
and
is
you-
the second time now.
If you can claim someone said something they didn't say, they should be able to correct you in the moment.
Do you feel good now that you said what you needed to say?
I feel fine.
Wonderful.
I'm sitting pretty. I'm fine.
So, I mean, sometimes it's like the power that needs to hold me back.
I mean, you're
because
appropriating a medical condition. That's what you're really doing.
I exist. I am proof that non-binary people exist and that it is a thing. And because I'm sitting right here in front of all of you, I'm a real person. This is my experience, just as yours is a trans experience. That as a trans woman, as a trans man, or as whatever. But I'm not here to belittle your experience or to tell you that you don't exist. And that's the difference between you and I, that you're trying to cancel you. And when I say you, I'm talking about conservatives. And maybe it is you. You're part of the thing. You're part of the thing.
Here's where I get to
so why
interject
is it
because there's
not
a lot of
okay?
things said about
Stop
me.
addressing her and just talk to everybody.
But what is your dysphoria?
Well, there was some things.
So, to their first point, and again, I'm gonna use there because God bless this person. I don't even know where to start. I don't even know where they would classify. I guess maybe gentleman would be the best word to use, but this individual talks about the fact that if they would have never been introduced to it, they would have never known. They could have lived their whole life not knowing, but because someone showed them the way, now they are their true self. They're embracing the side of themselves that they saw maybe with fear or with darkness at one point. They're no longer scared. And that is the exact same mental pattern that a pedophile goes through. Normalize, normalize, normalize. Oh my God, coming of age, first experience. That is the exact same rationale that a pedophile can use. And let me be clear, I'm not saying this individual is a pedophile. I am simply showing you the link between the mentality of one and the mentality of another. That is the exact same argument that a pedophile can make about the shit that they do.
So another complete, I don't want to say the word lie, but I guess that's what it is about what I've said here, right? I never said you don't exist. So we can add that to the long list of things y'all have said I've said that I didn't.
Right, and I didn't even get to touch on that. Nobody is saying that that person does not exist. Very obviously, they're on the screen. We can fucking tell that you exist. You're taking up quite the bit of space. Nobody is saying that you don't exist. What we are discussing is, again, the prompt, should non-binary be under the trans umbrella? And sweetie, you are not transgender. You're definitely something, but you're not transgender.
We know you exist. You're here. You're not fictitious, right? My point is, you're different than me, and I don't even think you deny that, but yet when I say it, it's an issue, right? The same way that he said he can't take that off, you can, right? It's different. At the very least, it's different. And when we have a community that there are so many categories, demi-girl, demi-boy, astrosexual, all this shit, but y'all can't fathom that maybe that would be a different category than what I am when we have such different, as you keep saying, and everyone keeps saying, experiences? It doesn't make sense. A bisexual is different than a gay man.
Can I ask a question? I just actually want to ask you a question. What is your dysphoria, though? Because gender dysphoria, or sex dysphoria, as I would rather call it, is an uncomfortability between my secondary sex characteristics, not just what I wear on a daily basis, because masculinity and femininity doesn't have anything to do with being trans.
But that's not true. But that is not true. You can have dysphoria without having.
It's very unfortunate, but notice how Sarah, I believe her name was, finished talking, and it took this individual 5-10 seconds to, you can tell with the eyes, to think of a response, because it was very obvious that what Sarah said, it hit, and they understood what she was trying to say. It's very obvious. You can literally look at the eyes. You can see it in the eyes.
To be dysphoric about your sex parts.
But what is your
You can have
dysphoria?
dysphoria
What
about
is your
anything.
dysphoria?
Straight cis women have dysphoria about their breasts all the time. They get breast augmentation.
not dysphoria.
That doesn't mean that
dysphoria.
I'm not dysphoric about certain things. That doesn't mean that. And you don't know my life.
Okay, so what are they? She asked you a very simple question. Where does your gender dysphoria come from? What are you dysphoric about? And you said it comes from many places. Name one.
If you're not in my life
Well, that's
daily,
why I asked you a question.
you don't know what
I
I
cannot-
experience, the different things that I experience personally.
I cannot believe that I grew up as, this 5-year-old little kid experiencing just crippling gender dysphoria, like horrible thoughts, struggled so much my entire life to be sitting in this room and you're explaining to her what dysphoria is.
I have my experience.
Again, thank you for bringing that up, Blaire. The man in the beret with really ugly lipstick is trying to tell Sarah, a transgender woman, you can tell because she's actually done the fucking work. He is trying to tell her what dysphoria is when Sarah actually transitioned because of dysphoria.
It doesn't mean that I
amazing.
didn't have crippling.
You got a different
It doesn't
experience.
mean
you
that
got a
I
different
myself-
experience.
We all have a different. We all have a
We all have
different
different experiences.
Which makes us different.
I know, but we're all
It's
both
okay.
not.
It's okay,
Different
y'all.
things. That's it. It's that simple.
We don't identify as our gender at birth.
So do regular transgender people. If they feel uncomfortable, this is literally the reason why Blaire was having the conversation of transgender people in the bathroom earlier. When Blaire was talking about it, she was literally saying how it comes to a certain point where if Blaire goes into the wrong bathroom looking the way that she looks, not only can it cause a disturbance, but it can actually be a very violent situation to put herself in, to go into the man's bathroom when she very obviously does not look like a man. Jesus, I literally cannot. The second to last prompt was, doctors are manipulating trans medical care.
Doctors are manipulating trans medical care.
Yes, they are.
I think there's 3 types of doctors out there. I think there are the ones who absolutely think that they're doing this for the right reasons. I think that there are the ones who are absolutely doing it for money, like we saw at Vanderbilt. The people at Vanderbilt literally said this is a huge moneymaker. And then I think that there are, I don't know if it's incompetence or ineptitude or laziness. Because what we're seeing, not just in the trans community, we're seeing in society, SSRIs being pushed on patients. Mental health doctors are pushing so many different drugs without getting to the root issues.
See, I have an interesting.
Yeah, and before we keep listening to that, I have an interesting perspective on this because for maybe a little over a year, I was on an SSRI. I don't even remember at this point what it was called, but it was called Paxil. I was on Paxil, and I'm not transgender, but I was given that medication because I still do. I have a generalized anxiety disorder. Fun fact. That's just personal to me. I still deal with it now, but I've chosen to stop taking medication for multiple reasons. But one of the reasons was all of a sudden, instead of feeling good, I wanted to die. And I had no idea why. Because everything was going good in my life. I was going through a great time in my life, and I was sad. Very, very, very sad. And I did not know why. And so I found out that a huge symptom, especially after some time of being on it, is it making you want to die. And so without even consulting my therapist, psychiatrist, whatever, which I don't recommend you do, this is not medical advice, but without saying anything, because of how terrible I felt, I just stopped taking it. I just stopped taking it. And it wasn't even a week and a half, 2 weeks, where suddenly I started to feel like myself again. And guess what? After some time, I felt happier than I ever did when I was on that medication. So be very careful what you put into your body. Very careful.
I've been out for 11 years this year. I've been on testosterone since I was 15 years old. And even looking into it, I waltzed my little ass up into that doctor's office and I left on testosterone. He gave me my first shot in the doctor's office that day. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
I was 15 years old.
Jesus.
What if I had been wrong? What if I had been wrong? It really just is that
absolutely.
simple.
What if he would have been wrong?
I'm joining mid-convo.
Wow, nice to see you.
Because I think like it's not. I don't
Somebody has
think it's like a
brain.
huge widespread issue, but I think when we have like a for-profit healthcare system, it does happen. Like I feel like there are. I believe that people should be evaluated and go through tests. And like for me, getting on testosterone and getting surgery was a massive process in my life. But I do think that it probably happens. Just like you said, like with SSRIs and stuff, like things are overprescribed.
So I do think it's a massive issue. I think that society in general, as Sarah mentioned, is over-medicalized right now. We're in this weird climate where there are entire political movements behind if you do or you don't have a vaccine, you can't enter this building if you do, you can if you do, you know, it's like crazy. But, you know, when it comes to the trans issue, I think just the fact that there were really almost no detransitioners as recent as like 5-6 years ago, and the fact that it's exploded now shows that it is a massive issue. And, you know, I think that I can reflect what you said. I was over 18 when I started my hormones, but I had a 20-minute appointment, and just like you, I walked in and out with an estrogen prescription. Insane. I wasn't tested
I didn't
for my
have to
levels.
see a therapist first.
No.
I had no letter.
And you were a child.
I was a
That's
child.
crazy.
I was
So,
15
and
years
that
old.
is a very,
in
very
one of the most
common-
conservative states in the country. So if that's what's going on
Wow.
in Georgia,
Wow.
imagine what's going on everywhere else.
California, hello.
Yeah, when I went for my initial appointment, I literally helped my doctor find gender dysphoria on his chart and mark it for me.
That's insane.
And I walked out with my prescription that day.
I mean, because I do a lot of work with the D-trans community, and the problem is I actually don't really care too much about, you know, if you are an adult and you walk into a doctor's office and want estrogen and you walk out, I don't think that's an issue. What is an issue is when doctors are not giving all the information, when they're actually telling you that this is what's right for you, and then it's not. They're actually manipulating their patients. They're manipulating, you know, they say, if you don't do this, you're gonna kill yourself, and all this stuff. So I would actually rather a doctor say, I have no idea what this is gonna do to you, but it's your body, your choice, you can do what you want, and then leave you on your way, and you can make that decision.
Right.
I think they're not asking the patient.
Right. And I totally agree. I 100% agree. I think that generally speaking, around mental health medication, the research is just not there. And that I think is for all of them. Any medication that will affect your mental health, the research for it is not great. The research is not great. The research for the physical effects that it will give you, wonderful. They will death. Like they will tell you everything that they need to tell you very, very fast within that commercial. But when it comes to the mental health aspect, really nobody can predict it. Shout out to my therapist. My therapist is thankfully one of the sane ones who doesn't just hear what I have to say and affirm what I have to say. She actually helps me through my issues, but nothing to do with her. This is literally my point. When I let them know that I was having mental health issues, before I even saw my therapist, before I even had my first session, I was given a psychological evaluation. And again, before my first session, I was already on medication. So before I was able to even be given the opportunity to work my way out of it, I was on drugs. It took no time. And I am not going to just completely shit on it, because for some time it was helpful. It did help me. But I can't listen to this and sit here and tell you that after that year and some time, that it wasn't destroying and messing with my brain, because it was, because those thoughts were not mine. And that's exactly how I described it to my therapist. Those thoughts are not mine. So I can only imagine how terrible it must be for somebody who is now dealing with mental health issues because of their transition.
Why? Why do you feel this way? It's a simple question.
Another thing I was never informed of, when I started my hormone journey, and now it seems, like common sense, but I was, 20, so it's like, even 20-year-olds can have oversights. No one told me I had to freeze my sperm.
That's crazy.
So
Remember you
I'm
talked
years
about that.
into estrogen. I reached the point of adulthood where you maybe meet a partner where that might be something you want to do. And I learned that I can't. And it's simply because that doctor didn't care to tell me. And why? Who knows? Maybe it was because of money. It was easier for him or better for him to get me in and out and get that money rather than maybe a couple more appointments where I'm having to figure out, how to freeze my sperm in the meantime. But a lot of these doctors are also activists.
They also don't tell trans men that they're going to go through menopause.
Right. There's a lot of issues with trans men. Buck Angel talks about that.
He
A
almost
lot of
died.
issues. Yeah,
he's
he
a
almost
friend
died.
of mine.
Yeah.
That's wild. That somebody, first of all, that somebody almost died. I've talked about Buck Angel a few times on my channel. I didn't know that, but wow. It's insane. It's insane. The fact that you are 5, 6, 7 years into your transition, you're taking, HRT, hormone replacement, therapy drugs, whatever. And you go for, let's say, just your typical yearly appointment. You go in to tell your doctor, hey, I would like to have kids. I was told that as a transgender person, everything is reversible and, we can just fix it. So I want to go ahead and have kids. And the doctor says, oh, okay, yeah, totally. That's totally fine. Whatever. Did you freeze your sperm? We don't seem to have it like in the lab. Freeze my sperm for what? Oh, you didn't know you had to freeze your sperm in order to have kids? Yeah, you had to do that. Wait, but then what can I do now? Unfortunately, you're fucked. Unfortunately, you're fucked, ma'am. There's really not much you can do now. That's heartbreaking.
They never follow up, and you just fall off the rolls. So the stats on detransition is completely false.
So I want to say something. First of all, I want to empathize with everyone here when it comes to healthcare system, because
What a
it's
fucking saint.
not always for us. I don't think that doctors are manipulating trans care. I think they're still learning about trans care. And to your point, there is not a lot of research because the research is still new and fresh. Detransitioning is a thing, but truth be told, detransitioning is actually rare when it comes to not just wanting to be trans anymore. Now, the underlying factors within that is healthcare conditions, which I actually heard a trans man who is famous talk about, very well. I agree with what y'all were saying because these issues are very, very real, but also I think it's really because doctors are still learning about our experience.
So I just have to say some things that were brought up about detransitioners, which I found just a little bit ironic, right? Because for a community that is 1% or less of the general population, we can never seem to find it within ourselves to find empathy for it, even if it is the 1% of our community, which is detransitioners, and for the horrific medical malpractice, abuse, mental and spiritual turmoil they go through. It's like, so we want the rest of the world to say this 1% matters, but our 1% doesn't matter. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it's not as if they detransition because of, just like you said, the loosening of all the restrictions to get on these drugs. It's like, that's not a good thing. Gatekeeping is a good thing. Like making sure the right people are getting on these drugs so that there aren't regret cases, there aren't botched cases. That's what we have to go towards, because right now we're going down the slippery slope of anyone can get on it. Every single person here, I'm pretty sure, just stated that they went in and walked out in an hour or less to get their hormones. And that's a huge problem, especially a child.
Because of things that have happened to me,
at
I can see
15,
a
it's
future
crazy.
where transitioning for adults is banned. Like, I can, because of everything that's going on with kids.
I think most
Yeah, and unfortunately, that is the sad reality. It's the fact that these idiots and the idiots that they uplift are basically fucking it up for everybody. They're fucking it up for people like Blaire White, Buck Angel, like Sarah, like Andrew, I believe his name is. People who are actually trying to transition and make it work. Make it work. They're ruining it for everybody. They're ruining it for innocent people who don't want to have their dick out in the middle of the women's restroom. Real transsexual people. And the self-ID problem, you know, just basically deciding that you're transgender and not going to a doctor to affirm something like that again, because it is a mental health condition. It has to be affirmed by a doctor. Self-ID people are the ones that you see in the viral woke TikToks that I've reacted to on my channel before, where they have the really crazy blue colored hair and the full ass fucking beard, and they want you to call them a fucking ma'am or a fucking they them. Those self-ID people are fucking it up for everybody. And the crazy part about it is that they're not just fucking it up for trans people. They're fucking it up for gay people too, because people see behavior like this and they just associate it with all of us. They group us all together. So realistically, I might not be part of the trans community and neither might you, but if you're part of the gay community, you're assimilated close enough. You are. Make it clear where you stand.
I think most of us are against a ban on stuff like that. Obviously,
Yeah,
we're all sitting here
obviously,
for a
but-
reason. I think I had the common ground though, because everybody here kind of also admitted that we don't have the research, and so when we don't have the research, and I'll tell you, I think that adults can do what they want, but I think we don't push forward with transitioning children until we have the research. We do the research. And this is actually what GenSpec pushes as well. GenSpec organization, they push to get more research on it. So we absolutely know what this does. Because even the WPATH guidance, the latest guidance from WPATH, everything that it says even about puberty blockers, it cites a study and then it says we don't know.
To your point about gaining research, how do you expect the medical community to gain access to research if we're just preventing these folks to actually go through any of the processes to learn the scientific method of what is happening? Just like it with AZT drugs, where we learned that that was actually harming us, and now we have things like Biktarvy.
Yeah, so it's the same way as we have with any research. You have a very select, very heavy gatekeeping crew that you're allowed to, create these studies around. And you need a good checklist to be like, these people show all the actual signs of gender dysphoria. They are having like very strong distress, and in every state that's passed bans on access for minors also has provisions, except for in the most extreme cases, to conduct studies on.
It is so infuriating to me to bring up the whole Biktarvy and the way that Shane basically said, oh, well, why shouldn't we let these people, these children, fuck up their lives so we can learn from the research? And compared it to the deaths of thousands and thousands of gay men who had to die for the research of medication that they were literally dying to receive. How disgusting is it to basically say, oh, well, people sometimes have to die for us to gain research? That's literally, again, the same argument, because the juxtapositions are fucking crazy. That is literally the same fucking argument that the Nazi doctors who taught us all about hypothermia and all of those things that we learned, yeah, people actually died. We learned, but they died. Very, very cruel, cruel deaths. Now, when we test for certain medications, certain things, there are ways for them to test them in labs, their effectiveness, without killing people. That's fucking ridiculous, what this person just said. I think their name is Shane. Ridiculous. The last prompt was, gender-affirming transition is suicide prevention.
Gender-affirming transition is suicide prevention.
Look at our unified front.
I mean, obviously, it's a known thing that trans youth are at greater risk of suicide and just suicidal ideations, which are horrible and will plague you and like ruin your life and make it awful. And so I know there are a lot of kids in a lot of pain, and growing up as a trans kid, I was in so much pain, and I feel like I could have been spared of a lot of that and gotten to enjoy my life a lot more if I had earlier access to gender-affirming care. And even the gender-affirming care that I did receive later in my life, and I went on hormones when I was like 16 and I got top surgery at 17, that completely changed my life in the most dramatic way. And so yeah, I think it is life-saving care, and I think a lot of trans people would agree.
I agree as well too. I think gender dysphoria is a real thing, and we all deal with gender dysphoria differently. I know for myself or whatnot, there were times I wanted to end it all. And for me, I went to desperate measures to align my body with how I feel on the inside. And for some of us, especially living in the South, we don't always have access to hormone care. So some of us have to go to the black market. We have to do things to our body to be able to align us to where we are not willing to commit suicide.
What a terrible thing to tell our youth. If you don't find people who will blindly affirm you, then let's just end it. Simple as that.
Quite honest with you. Hold on just a second. To be quite honest with you, and let's also be clear that these researchers are also collaborating with these organizations because they are the ones that have the most outreach to the community that they need to serve, which is the trans community. Because oftentimes the reason why nonprofit grassroots organizations are created in the first place is because there was no place for us. And so it is really hard to get that research to be able to do that. We can agree to disagree, but the research has not been completely fulfilled yet because a lot of these people don't even know about our experience, and that is why it's important.
Look at Blaire's face.
We make it very clear what we need to do.
There's also, speaking of the numbers that come out of LGBT activist organizations, there was a little number that the life expectancy of a trans woman was 35. That was rescinded a couple years ago after like over a decade of that being like just factually, shared. And I always thought that my life was statistically going to end at 35. So, but those numbers were based on, by those organizations, prostitute deaths. So it's not always the most reputable numbers they're getting, you know what I mean? And these activist organizations are political too. We get caught up in calling them activists and we think it's this emotional, spiritual thing, but they are political organizations.
Yeah, so I am an activist, and so a lot of what you're talking about really was focused more on black trans women because black trans women do not live past the age of 35 because oftentimes it is our group within the trans community that is often murdered, we're often harassed, we're often discriminated against, and so a lot more of that focus has had to be around black, brown, indigenous folks because oftentimes the research goes missing for us.
They sourced it from prostitutes though. That was the source of the
But
stat.
see, the thing is though, even when we talk about prostitutes, trans women have to sometimes participate in sex work to survive.
But they based it off cis prostitutes. Sorry, I'm done. It was just, it was false number.
So from what I understand is,
Eat her ass up.
a lot of that focus has always been around black trans women because we do not get to see the age of 35. You are in a place, when I say privilege, you're in a place of privilege where you do not have to worry about the harassment and the discrimination that I face. I face as a black person. I face as a black person. I'm not going to say that you do not experience harassment or discrimination. That's not what I'm saying because like you said, you're a person of nuance, and so follow me here. When I come as a person of color, as a black trans woman, you and I do not get to have that same experience. There are
You went to the White House, I didn't.
There are more rooms that you get to walk in that I will be
Privilege, darling. It's called privilege.
forbidden in. And one thing about it is that's why it's important, like someone like me has to create her own space to be able to counteract what you're doing. And I'm not saying that you don't. But what I'm saying here is what I'm trying to get you to understand is my blackness should not have to pay for your whiteness that
doesn't make
is
sense.
destroying my community.
I'm
Because of
destroying your
privilege.
community.
So are you gonna tell all of my exes
How are you gonna
that?
say that and then that's the end?
What you're talking about too is
I'm saying like a Blossom, like can we turn Blossom into a Halloween costume, because that was iconic. My community. That was crazy. That was iconic. I'm just gonna say that was iconic. I can, as a gay man, I can recognize iconicism or whatever the fuck. Yeah, what a disaster. And as we all saw, as Blaire has been saying from the very beginning, the moment that she was gonna rebuttal, they were like, oh, we're just gonna move on to the next prompt. We're just gonna move on to the next one. What Blaire is saying makes so much sense. The statistics are skewed. Why? Because most of these organizations, all of these organizations, are politically motivated. Look at all of the new information that we all know about the Black Lives Matter organization and how all of that, from the looks of it, all of that money was allegedly mishandled. Do you see any sort of advancement within Black communities? Did they, I don't know, build a new neighborhood? Did they start a new neighborhood watch program? Did they, I don't know, suggest a new way to implement better racial education in police groups, or I don't know, fucking police departments or whatever? No, they didn't. That money was misappropriated and used to buy jets and houses and whatever the fuck else, again, allegedly. But we know a lot more than we did before. We don't know where that money is going to.
I enjoyed this debate for what it was. You know, it was quite ugly at certain points, and I wish that it was all trans people on the panel, because that would have been more appropriate and more fitting.
You're so offensive.
Trans people on the panel.
You're an offensive
Okay.
person, human being.
Okay. Well, I find a lot of things over here offensive as well.
Oh wow. Yeah, you're disgusting.
And I have to. Trust me, the feeling is more than mutual. But I will say that it was very enlightening, and I hope to be back at Jubilee. But I will say
I definitely think this was
very
interesting.
enlightening,
Obviously, I don't think we
and
have a lot of
I
common
hope to be
ground
back
on a
at
lot of
Jubilee.
things, but I think we found
I
some.
definitely think
I think what most conservatives in general believe is, as an adult, you can do what you want with your body. I talk to conservatives all the time. We don't allow children to make decisions for themselves on a wide range of issues, and that's why we don't let them, mutilate their bodies. Range of issues.
I mean, it was, yeah, it was educational, enlightening. I got to learn a lot. It was nice meeting all of you.
And what better way to end it than there? Just to talk about the last few things that just happened now. I agree. I wish it would have been a panel of actual transgender people, fully transgender people. Maybe we could have actually gotten another perspective, a perspective that actually mattered to this specific conversation. And like Blaire said, I don't think I've seen any Jubilee debate. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen any debate where the consensus on who won it is unanimous. Blaire and the Conservatives very, very easily mopped the floor with the other panelists. And Blaire, she's specifically responsible for the permanent dent that will now be attached to the integrity of Jubilee. Jubilee was a platform that was highly regarded and admired by all sides of the political spectrum. It is literally known as the place where people go to find middle ground. Now Jubilee and the panelists that they hand-selected have tarnished and dissolved the reputation that they worked so long and so hard to build. I don't know where they go from here, but I can assure you that they are not the pioneers of free and honest conversations that they pretend to be. All right, y'all. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet for the outro. If you liked what I had to say today, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Comment down below if you agree that this was just an absolute shit show. I mean, I'm not really too sure what other opinion you might have on this, but let me know down below if you have anything else to add, and I'll see you on the next one.